Chapter 398, Behind the Scenes. Since you are so confident about them, then I guess there is no issue. Conrad stroked his chin as he looked at Vita, who also nodded at him. They both appeared relieved, and it seemed their intention was to convey some details of what they told Relix to the students. Of course, some details would have to be exempt. The Royal Dungeon was originally designated as a disaster class, but it evolved into an unidentified class. Conrad asked, looking straight at the masked man. What class would you choose to give it, as an adventurer? Grand Calamity class. F for real. Yes. The monsters there were of the highest caliber, and with only 9 of them, and a bit of assistance from me, it was cleared in a month. Granted, they desired to clear this new Grand Calamity dungeon in 9 days, preferably 7, but from the way the students had grown, it would suffice to say that they were capable of a conquest on their own. At their current level, they should be able to take on a Grand Calamity class dungeon on their own. Is that something that can be arranged? Not only would it prevent any needless deaths, but it would also guarantee some form of victory. Last of all, it would allow every one of the otherworlders to go all out and face the new challenge with all their wits and abilities. Unfortunately, that isn't possible. Conrad shook his head and sighed. The dungeon is on the property of the Adventurers' City, and so it is well within their right to choose how they handle it. The only reason we are considering going is because they have chosen to seek our assistance. Normally, the government of the United Human Alliance could not tread on the dungeons belonging to the Adventurers' City. The only reason taxes and levies were imposed on them was due to the cause that was the war with the dragons. The Adventurers' City had to pay their dues as part of the contribution in the good fight. If we choose to bypass the rules and sneak the 9 of them into the dungeon, it will only be a repeat of what happened 300 years ago. Many people still hadn't forgotten the treachery of the nations all those years ago. If they tried to do something so vile once again, it meant they hadn't learned from the mistakes of their ancestors. Even if it will be faster and easier for the 9 to single-handedly handle this dungeon, I doubt any adventurer would agree to such a proposal. Even if we decide to forfeit all the rewards, they wouldn't be satisfied. The EXP gained from a dungeon. The thrill of risking one's life to get stronger and richer. And the pride of adventurers in their livelihood, these factors were hindrances that would prevent Relix's suggestion from being remotely considered. As an adventurer, you must understand how stubborn those in your occupation tend to get. I mean no offense, Sir Relix. Conrad smiled nervously, to which the dark adventurer simply shrugged at. I take no offense at words of truth. I personally find most of them to take on old-fashioned positions, but it is not in my place to critique their values. Relix exhaled loudly, his gaze raised to the ceiling as if he was deep in thought about something. After a few seconds, he then spoke. Have them integrate with the adventurers then, preferably joining different parties. It should offer at least some benefit that way. Pardon? What do you mean by that? Conrad asked, his brows raised slightly. I get it, Sir Relix. You want us to get accustomed to fighting without each other. If we're in different parties, we'll learn how to function with others rather than just one another. Adonis beamed, instantly severing the confusion in the air. Conrad and Vita weren't warriors and fighters. They weren't much of strategists either, though they tried their best in that regard. When it came to war, however, they were nearly incompetent. After all, experience was the most important factor in that field, and sheltered leaders had very rare opportunities to witness the evils of battle. Indeed. Relix nodded at Adonis and responded calmly. Even if you have to share EXP with the adventurers, and probably forfeit most of the rewards gotten from inside a dungeon, you can still learn valuable things there. They were practically making lemonade with the lemons being thrown at them. One final thing about the report, Sir Relix. Conrad spoke up. I didn't think to mention it since it was just a passing comment that hasn't been confirmed yet. But the worried look on the Grand Master's face made it clear that it worried him a little. They mentioned a disturbing, negative pouring of the dungeon. There is speculation that this energy could be miasma. Upon hearing this, a powerful surge of energy swept across the room. For only a mere instant, it felt like the entire space was coated in bloodlust. Everyone was paralyzed under the pressure that came from one man. Did you just say miasma? Relix asked, his voice low but deadly. Conrad gulped as he nodded, beads of sweat proceeding from his lips. Vita appeared equally uncomfortable, though shock mostly filled her face. Is there a problem, Sir Relix? You. No. None at all. As he calmly exhaled, the pressure vanished, and the ambience in the room returned to normal. Just be careful. The existence of miasma makes this dungeon more difficult than I previously estimated. No worries, Sir Relix. I'm sure we can handle it. Adonis' words oozed confidence, and for a moment the hero and dark adventurer gazed at each other in silence. After the next few seconds, Relix nodded and shrugged. Very well. I trust in your judgment. Adonis smiled in relief, but it also seemed like he was proud of himself after hearing such praise from the strongest man he knew. By the way, Sir Relix, I have been meaning to ask. Vita spoke up, her tone as cautious as it was mellow. What is it? A few seconds passed before a response, in the form of a question, was posed. Are you going to be participating in the dungeon conque? No. No, I won't. Relix answered bluntly, not even waiting for the question to be complete. You all are on your own this time. The words he uttered surprised everyone. They couldn't even hide their surprise if they wanted to. Why? The inevitable question leaked out of Adonis' lips. Relix was the most powerful ally humanity had at the moment. If he went to the Grand Calamity Dungeon, he would be able to prevent the unnecessary deaths of possibly thousands of people. Plus, since he was an adventurer, there would be no complaints from the authorities. He had every right to challenge it on his own too. I have my reasons. Reasons I cannot disclose. He answered, swiftly rising to his feet. I wish you the best of luck, though. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Yet another chapter with dialogue alone. I do apologize for the slow pace, but please be patient with me once again. This arc is gonna be lit. Chapter 399, Behind the Scenes. If I may be so impudent, could you please tell us the nature of what you have to do? The one who asked the question was Adonis. Yes, he respected Relix immensely. The man was incredibly powerful, and he was selfless in many regards. Despite all his good qualities, Adonis could not remain blind to a few of his suspicious traits. For example, his unwillingness to participate in a dungeon conquest that would definitely be a betterment to humanity. I have some private investigations I will need to conduct, so I won't be around for an extended period of time. Relix responded calmly, still on his feet. And it cannot wait. It pained Adonis to press on this way, but he had no choice. As someone who had seen the future one where there was no Relix, he had to understand this man very well. It cannot. Once Relix gave this response, Adonis felt deflated. He had no right to pry any further, and in all honesty, Relix was doing him a big favor by even responding to the questions. Sorry for asking so many unnecessary questions. Adonis bowed, but the dark adventurer shrugged it off. It's fine. Also, while I won't be around, I don't mind transporting everyone to the adventurer's city tomorrow. Upon hearing this, everyone in the room beamed. The adventurer's city was very far. Even on the fastest carriage, it would take nearly a week to reach the location. The fastest way to get there would be through magic, but since none of the students had spatial magic, it wouldn't be an easy feat. If they boosted their transportation with items and the likes, they would still need a few days to reach the location. The higher UPS at the Adventurers Guild also recognize this, so they are probably not expecting much from us despite requesting for our assistance. Conrad thought to himself, smiling intensely. But with Sir Relix, we can bypass all of those problems. That was one of the major reasons why they called him in. Still, it's strange. Even the higher UPS don't know who Sir Relix is. It boggled the mind, but Conrad had learned to simply let the complicated matters go and just focus on the good aspects of life. Right now, we have everything ready for our participation in the conquest. All that is left is, of course, the consent of the otherworlders. Whether or not they would accept was a different ball game entirely, but it didn't concern Relix in the slightest. I'll return in the evening tomorrow, so please be prepared by then. As he said this, sparks of energy manifested, followed by a distortion of space behind him. Understood. Conrad, Vita, and Adonis rose to their feet and nodded. Thank you once again, Sir Relix. It's no problem. He shrugged as he began entering the portal. Then, out of nowhere, a panicked voice rose from among the trio, its origin still a mystery. Could you also transport us to the estate fields? I think we're a little behind schedule on. Sure. And that was how the Royal Council met up with the waiting students while Relix gracefully made his exit. The students dispersed after the entire announcement, and most of them decided to make the most of their time before heading to the Adventurer's City. Since they would be leaving on the evening of the next day, they still had considerable time to have fun. For different people, that could be defined in various ways. Regarding Ray and Alicia, however, it meant one thing. Reading in the library. The two of them sat in silence, within the four walls of the library. They were surrounded by the fresh smell of paper and parchments, soaking in the decorum that only the inner sanctum of knowledge could provide. The result was absolute immersion in what they found pleasure in most. At least, this was true for one of the two people in the room. While Alicia was busy consuming the contents of the book in her grasp, hungrily devouring the knowledge within it as if there was no tomorrow, Ray's distracted gaze merely rested on his own book. His mind was elsewhere. Miasma, huh? Could this be Adrian's work? Is he somehow related to this entire incident? Ray wasn't sure what to think. For one, it didn't seem likely that Adrian would orchestrate some big event like this that would attract the attention of so many people. Besides, dungeons popping out of nowhere. Even grand calamity ones had happened before. As such, it wasn't some unknown, unexplainable phenomenon. Trying to pin it on Adrian Chase, just because miasma was involved, felt a bit far-fetched to Ray. But Adrian has found ways to manipulate even the most ordinary looking scenarios and made them all work for his benefit. Perhaps he caused the dungeon appearing, but it's also possible that he didn't cause this dungeon's appearance, but he has plans for it. Either way, Ray couldn't help but feel like he was being lured in. I don't like this one bit. It was one of the major reasons why he chose not to appear as Relix. he would be taking too big of a risk, and that could be playing into Adrian's hand. I'll have to think of another way to go about this. Ray sighed. With the conquest happening, and so many things about to take place at the same time, Ray felt a bit overwhelmed with all of it. I actually kind of miss Ader now. Who would have thought? He smiled to himself and shook his head. I wonder what he would have done if he was in my position. As Ray lay on his bed and closed his eyes, he sighed and imagined everything that could happen to him and his classmates within the city and inside the dungeon. I've never been to the Adventurer's City, so. A brief smile crept on his face and he internally made a decision. I'll have to ask around a bit before reaching my conclusion. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. What do you think? Is Adrian behind this situation? Also, who has a guess on what Ray will do about this? I await your thoughts. Chapter 400, City of Adventures. Distant footsteps could be heard as two individuals trod down the path that many took. Yet, for some reason, only these two currently walked it. They wore contrasting attires, easily drawing the attention of the people around them. A few individuals even trailed behind them, maintaining their distance of course. One or two of these people had been watching these two strangers from the moment they stepped into the city through the south gate. It wasn't strange for the Adventurer's City to have guests or visitors, but something about these two made them stand out, and it wasn't just their well-made and pristine outfits. They had a unique aura about them, and any veteran could tell just from a glance. Whoever they were, the two were strong. After walking for a while, they finally arrived at their destination, the only place strangers in the city would be interested in. The Adventurers Guild. The place was a tall, massive building. It had at least 5 separate floors, not counting the ground floor. It also had an intimidating aura about it to ward off those who were too weak-willed to take a bold step of faith. This was the effect of an especially powerful enchanted item, so it wasn't news to see 1 or 2 fools attempt to join the ranks of adventurers, only to piss themselves and run away scared. Not everyone was cut out to be an adventurer. The item's effect was meant to prove that by exposing the frauds among those who wanted to give it a shot. Only those who were truly cut out for the task could step into the guild. Usually, amused grins would be let out by spectating adventurers, but no one said or did anything this time. They already knew that these two were more than worthy to step in. And yes, just like that. They both walked into the Adventurers Guild without any issue whatsoever. Though the duo didn't realize this, they had already passed the first test of the Adventurers City. Whether they would be able to overcome the next hurdle, however, was yet to be decided. Burke was a frustrated woman who worked in an equally frustrating place. The loud noise generated by the adventurers who occupied the pub upstairs could be heard even in the reception, which was practically the whole of the ground floor. She, among about a dozen others, stood behind desks as they waited to be approached by adventurers and clients. Opposite where their desks were situated was the big board, as it was called by the adventurers, where the available quests would be displayed. If an adventurer was interested in a quest, they only needed to identify the quest number and register their names and badges with any of the receptionists in order for their acceptance of the mission to be officially recognized by the guild. This way, once they were done with the quests, they could obtain their reward straight from the guild without any issues. There was also a time limit given, for accountability, so if an adventurer registered for a quest and was unable to complete it within the specified period, they would be penalized. Of course, as was the nature of humans, many tried to bypass this hurdle by starting a quest and only registering their acceptance when they were almost done completing it, or when they were already done. While a few got away with it using this method, most could not. This was because each quest had an entry limit, and as such once the limit was reached, no one could register their acceptance. Several stories had been told of adventurers who tried to play smart with the system, but ended up working for free due to being too late to accept a quest after doing most of the work beforehand. The lesson here was to do things the proper way to avoid any complications, and that was what most adventurers in the upper ranks did. Only scramblers in the lower ranks resorted to such underhanded means. Burke mulled over all of this information she already knew as she sighed internally. She had a slight frown on her face, which she quickly corrected so that her face wouldn't age too quickly. For some time now, the lady had been making sure to pay close attention to her appearance, especially since she wasn't getting any younger. Burke was in her mid-30s, but one glance at her would make you think she was in her 20s. That was the wonder that enchanted items and a lot of skincare could do. Her goal was simple: one day marry a strong man who would take care of her and not allow her to work for the rest of her life. Workers of the Adventurers Guild met with strong people all the time, which was why she chose this career path, but after working here for over 10 years now, Burke found herself regretting that decision. These adventurers are too crass. Other than a few exceptions, they're ruffians. None of them were gentlemen who could treat a woman right. Even those who were gentlemen weren't the type who supported her dream of perpetual retirement. Pretty much every adventurer she met and had an interest in thought that their partner had to work somehow. Their line of reasoning made sense, considering how there were tons of female adventurers who were in the city. Burke couldn't accept it, though. Women should just be pretty and stay at home, while the men work and protect them. That was her philosophy, and it remained unchanged despite how long she had spent in the adventurer's city. Her mindset only did her a disservice, though. No veteran desired her, as most of them sought after strong women who would understand the rigors of being an adventurer. The only adventurers who paid her any attention were new and inexperienced adventurers who didn't have a penny to their name. They couldn't even take care of themselves, talk less of a non-working partner. In the end, she felt trapped somehow. "Excuse me, miss." The deep voice of a man in front woke Burke from her thoughts, and so she lifted her gaze to attend to the next customer. Unknown to her, this one encounter would change her life forever. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Sorry for the long tangent. I really am. I just got lost in the sauce. Forgive me, everyone. Chapter 401, City of Adventures. AHH. As Burke raised her head to gaze upon the man who called for her, she found herself quickly overwhelmed by the presence before her. There wasn't just one man, but two people, a man and a woman. They both had a unique aura that only veterans gave off, but Burke didn't recognize them. There are over 10,000 adventurers in the city, but there aren't that many that have such peculiar appearances and intense vibe. Burke found herself gulping as she took in the sight. The man in question had a hat on, and it covered a slight portion on his face, while casting a dark shadow on his dark purple eyes. He had a long black coat, while wearing a full suit underneath. He had traces of silver as designs on his coat as well as his tie. His tie and belt also bore the same silver color, but he was mostly shrouded in black. This stranger held a briefcase in his right hand, its contents unknown. Other than a small portion of his pale face, and his exposed neck, no other part of his skin was exposed. He had hand gloves on, and all other parts of his body were covered in the darkness of mystery. Yes, this was an absolute stranger. If someone like this was an adventurer, I would know. Burke told herself as she examined his exquisite wear. He wasn't the only one who took her attention, though. The lady who wore white, in contrast to the dark gentleman's attire, was equally astonishing. She had a hooded cape on, with the helm covering most of her face. It was pure white, having gold designs and a tinge of blue to add an allure of beauty and regality to her appearance. The rest of her outfit was the same. The lady had an amazing blue-white top, with a brown belt tied and buckled at the top of her waist, along with a darker shade of blue as her trousers. Her boots were pure white, laced with blue as well. Even though her face was hidden, she seemed like an angel in disguise just from what anyone could see. A sharp contrast to the devil-like wear of the dark gentleman. These two. Just who are they? It was rare seeing clients with this kind of presence, having this kind of equipment on. Burke wasn't even the only who felt this way. She could even see that literally everyone in the reception hall had their eyes on the two strangers, having the same look of wonder and awe in their eyes. Of course, all of this observation lasted only a few seconds in Burke's mind. In reality, though, over a minute had passed and still the two were waiting to be attended to. "Excuse me, me. Sorry about that. Welcome to the Adventurers Guild. How may I help you two today?" Burke quickly responded, a little mortified that she managed to get distracted twice. This had been happening a lot lately, up to the point where a few people had made complaints about her absent-mindedness. "I'll have to beg these two not to give any negative reviews about my service to them." That also meant she had to provide them with the most exceptional service they could get. "Okay, I'm pumped up now." Her eyes were lit with determination as she awaited the words of her clients. "We would like to register as adventurers." The man in the hat spoke, his monotone remaining the same. Burke nodded with enthusiasm as her thoughts flowed seamlessly. "Adventurers, huh? Figures that they're not just ordinary clients. Many would mistake them for aristocrats, but their attires consisted of nothing but enchanted items. And the way they conducted themselves made it clear that they were experienced." Burke could only wonder what line of work they engaged in before coming to the guild. "All right, then. You'll need to fill out these forms." She pulled out two pieces of paper from seemingly nowhere and placed them on the desk. Of course, pens were also provided for them as well. "Take your time to." "We're done." The man's voice greeted Burke's ears the moment she blinked, causing both to bulge the moment she heard the statement he made. "Yet." Her widened eyes looked at the two forms, and sure enough, they were already filled to the letter. Most adventurers, despite being rash and savage, took much longer when it came to filling out forms. In fact, a lot of them required help from the receptionists since they were illiterates. Of course, Burke didn't think the distinguished two in front of her were illiterates, but she also found it difficult to believe they could finish everything in the blink of an eye. However, after examining their forms, she had no choice but to accept what had happened. Their handwritings are so fluent, and they took care of everything needed for them, while leaving the appropriate space meant for the guild staff to fill. All without any prior instruction or explanation. "That's impressive." She went over the names of the two applicants and smiled. "So the girl is Lux, and the man is Jet." Burke found the latter amusing, considering how the strongest adventurer in history had the same name. "I suppose he also looks up to Jet Zephyr." Burke smiled and nodded. When registering as an adventurer, it wasn't necessary to use one's real name. As a result, many often resorted to nicknames which would serve as their moniker. Of course, there were many who chose the name Jet as their adventurer name, but none of them managed to make it stick. All, without exception, returned to make rectifications within 3 days. Burke thought of telling the two, but decided against it. I shouldn't ruin the rite of passage for anyone. She smiled to herself. So, it says here that you two belong to the same party. Would you like that to be officially recognized by the guild? Doing so meant that the guild regulated their profit sharing, and would think of them as a single entity in circumstances of liability and so on. Of course, it was up to the parties involved if they desired this. Normally, candidates would take their time to consider this question, but there was no hesitation in the answer that came next. Yes. Yes, we would. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed the chapter, and if you didn't, I'm sorry. This is all necessary, still. So hang in there, okay? Haha. Chapter 402, City of Adventures. The rest of the registration process didn't take too long. Burke was soon finished with most of it. There were just a few things left, and that included their signature, a shot of their real face, and the adventurer test that they would each have to participate in. Of course, depending on the rank they desired, they would have to pay the appropriate sum to take the test. This way, the guild wouldn't suffer any losses from organizing the test and accommodating the candidate. The duo didn't have an issue with the signature, which was essentially just them imprinting their mana on the form. Anyone who desired to be an adventurer had to at least have a skill, and since skills required mana, it was expected for candidates to be able to use it. Imprinting mana wasn't very difficult, as the paper itself would extract the mana once it made contact with the necessary part of the candidate's body. It required no skill or innate mana control. After the signature was the face reveal, which was just standard procedure when it came to registration procedures. Do we really have to show our faces? The gentleman in black asked. His deep tone was calm, showing no hint of anxiety or skepticism. It just seemed like he was mildly curious. Yes, sir, it's standard procedure. If you want to keep your identity hidden, we can move to a private place where you'll show your face to the receptionist in charge of you, i.e. me. Of course, you'd also have to fill another form for. There's no need for that. We'll do it here. Burke nodded at his words, though she made a silent observation as the conversation progressed. The lady beside him isn't saying anything. Why? The gentleman was speaking for both of them as if it was natural. They both outlined in their history that they were partners, and they even opted to be recognized as a party by the guild. Are they married or something? Burke wondered. Before she could conclude her line of thought, the man took off his hat, revealing his silvery dark hair. It had a certain charm to it, and the excess hair was packed behind with a dark band. The few unruly strands fluttered around, revealing the pale and incredibly handsome face of the young man. His dark purple eyes were charming, and his soft-looking skin was sharply contrasted with the stern look he had on. Something about his demeanor felt threatening. He's so handsome. He's more handsome than any adventurer I've ever seen. Burke wanted to scream out loud. He also had a very gentlemanly voice, with a calm face and a proper attitude. This man, Jet, was everything she looked for in a man. Sure, he was just a newcomer, but merely looking at his equipment it was easy to deduce that he was a man of means. If I could have someone like him, then. Before she could conclude her line of thoughts, the woman beside the man took down her hood. The moment Burke gazed upon the pristine beauty that stood before her, she didn't dare have another thought about the gentleman. Lux had white hair, so long that they streamed past her back. Her clear blue eyes could captivate anyone. Even a woman like Burke was mesmerized. Her heart nearly stopped at the sight. Her skin wasn't as pale as the gentleman, but she had a similar soft-looking skin. Without a doubt, she was an unparalleled beauty. As both of them gods of beauty in their respective rights stood before Burke, she nearly fainted from overexposure to pure attractiveness. If this is his partner, I don't stand a chance. No. Even if Lux wasn't his partner, did she really deserve a man as perfect as Jet? AHH. I see now. At that point, Burke had an epiphany. Her inner eyes became open to the very things she couldn't see in the past. The things she chose not to see. All this time, I've always thought that the men in the city aren't good enough for me, but I never bothered asking myself why I didn't attract the men that I desired. Men like Jet deserved women like Lux. Likewise, if she was going to find the man of her dreams, then maybe she also had to be deserving of him. Perhaps I should find a way to better myself somehow, if I don't want to settle for less. Being a receptionist, with nothing to go for but her job and good looks, the kind of men she would attract were those who were interested in those things. If she didn't want to work after settling down, that left only her good looks on the table. I'm 35. These looks won't last forever. In fact, they were already fading very quickly. Many veteran adventurers already knew how long she had been working in the guild, and of all the receptionists present, she had the most experience. Perhaps it's time I advance and move on with my life. Burke thought to herself, her eyes glistening in resolve. I should. What next, miss? Burke's introspection was interrupted by the words of the charming gentleman. She nearly jumped out of her seat the moment she heard his voice. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. To say she was flustered would be an understatement. Shit. Once again, I got distracted. Beads of sweat appeared on her face. She quickly cleaned them off with her neat napkin and returned her mind to the task. The two in front of her had calm, stoic faces. They simply waited for her to regain her composure and address them properly. Well, all that's left is to take the adventurer test. As you know, the test is divided into categories based on difficulty, which determine the rank of an. We will take the most difficult one. The man said, his tone so smooth that Burke nearly nodded in response. That was until she realized what he just uttered. Huh? You want to take the heroic rank test? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I guess we finally got to see Burke's small character arc now. I'll try to focus solely on the story at hand. Sorry once again. Chapter 403, City of Adventures. Man isn't equal. No matter where you go to in the world, there is always a hierarchy, some kind of strata that explains the natural order of things. So also is the way of the adventurers. Among the ranks of the adventurers, there exists a hierarchy of rank defined by stars, from 1 star to 6 stars. They define the strength and competence of the adventurers, and also determine the kind of tasks they can undertake. Within this strata, 6 stars remain the highest rank attainable by an adventurer, no, by any human, period. Only 3 adventurers currently have this rank in the entire adventurers' city. It is also called by another name. The heroic rank. Huh? You want to take the heroic rank test? Burke's voice was so loud that the entirety of those within the room heard what she said. It stunned even her, causing a look of shock to appear all over her face. I didn't expect to be so loud. I've just spilled confidential information. Tears nearly welled up in her eyes. If these people weren't planning on giving her a bad review before, now that she had done this, there was no way they would let it slide. She couldn't escape the punishment for her negligence. Yes. We would like to take it. B. But there's no rule stating we can't, is there? The moment the man asked this, Burke had to fall silent and shake her head. The adventurers believed in freedom above all else, so there was no rule confining the candidates to a particular set of tests, or placing a ceiling on the options available to an aspirant. As long as they had the guts and money necessary to take the test, there was no limit to what they could or couldn't participate in. Then, we'd both like to take the test. How much is it? Burke sighed and decided to tell them the price. Perhaps once they heard it, they would change their minds. 1 platinum coin each. And there's no refu. Here you go. 2 platinum coins were placed on the table before Burke could even complete her sentence. What did I expect? They were dressed this fancily, looked this attractive, and they both want to take the heroic rank test. Nothing about these two was ordinary, and she was a fool to have expected their actions to make any kind of sense. Oh, okay. Burke took the coins and inspected them, per procedure. They were legitimate, but after placing it in the appropriate coin register, she pulled out 2 tags and handed them to the candidates. Please return here after 24 hours to take your test. I thought we could take the test immediately after registration. Jet asked, his brow raised in inquisition. Of course, he still looked despite his confusion, so Burke was happy to clarify the whole thing. If this was any other test, that would be the case. But, it takes a lot of preparation to organize the heroic rank test, which is why you'll have to return tomorrow. Jet stared at Lux, and they both nodded as if they just exchanged a message telepathically. Understood. Then, we will return tomorrow. Burke nodded and smiled at the two. There's no doubt about it. They're definitely together. Is there anything we need to know before tomorrow? Any further thing to process? And no. Once you're done with your test, you'll be given your badge, and that's about it. Burke answered, but quickly realized her unconscious choice of words. Why did I assume that they would pass? Very well. Thank you for your time. Jet bowed his head slightly and wore his hat while Lux pulled up her hoodie and hid her face. It was already too late to hide their identities, as pretty much everyone had caught a glimpse of it, though most of them didn't get to see their whole face. There was even an uproar in the reception hall, though all of it was ignored by the 3 parties who were engaged in their conversation. Thank you as well. Burke didn't even attempt to plead for a good review, but her tongue slipped and she ended up saying what she shouldn't have. What a nice couple. Once again, her voice was louder than expected. As a result, the 2 who were already leaving stopped dead in their tracks. Eek. Burke knew she was going to get in trouble this time for sure. However, rather than reprimand her for speaking so carelessly, Jet merely chuckled and responded in the calmest manner possible. We're not a couple. We're siblings. With those words of correction uttered, Jet and Lux casually stepped away from the reception area and headed straight for the exit. Burke watched their backs as they left, her jaw wide open as only one thought filled her mind. He was single all along. What an amusing lady. Indeed. As the partners Black and White stepped out of the guild building, their whispers faintly filled the air around them. Their silent footsteps and gentle strides showed just how graceful they were. Even the briefcase that the man held was as graceful as the man who wielded it. It was practically evening already, with the sun setting in the distance, the perfect time to settle in an inn. Despite knowing this, the 2 halted their steps. This wasn't due to some kind of negligence on their part. Instead, their sudden stop was caused by a group of about 6 men who stood in front of them. They all had rough appearances and reeked of alcohol. Despite this, there was an air of intensity about them that made it clear that they weren't mere novices in the game. These were veteran adventurers. "Is there a problem? You're in our way." Jet spoke, his voice the only echo of reason among the annoyed grunts that the six made. "A problem, huh? Yes. You could say that." The one who seemed like the leader stepped forward. He was very tall, with dark skin and a muscular build. He was clearly a barbarian. If his ebony skin and plaited hair didn't give it away, then his terrible attitude made for the perfect introduction. "I hear you plan on taking the heroic rank test." "Yes. That is correct." The moment the man heard this, he drew his face closer to Jet and slightly turned his head in a threatening manner. "Oi! Wanna die?" For a moment, tense silence took control. That was until the remaining drunk adventurers oh'd and awed at the entire scene. They seemed amused for some reason. "Sango is gonna beat them good. Take it easy or they're gonna piss themselves." Intense from the start, as expected of the vice-captain. Their cackles were unpleasant to the ears, and despite them making a scene, no one seemed to be stopping them. Despite there being quite a number of onlookers, it seemed like many were intrigued by the confrontation and wanted to see what would happen. Finally making a move, Jet held his hat and lowered his head, his voice spreading throughout the area despite being a mere whisper. "I would appreciate it if you did not bathe me with your foul breath, you fool." Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 404, City of Adventures. What did you just say? Sango's face seemed to depict a fair bit of shock as soon as he heard the response of the stranger in black. His brows were raised in genuine surprise. "You heard me well enough. Step back if you know what is good for you." More surprise filled Sango's face. "Do you not know who I am? Who we are?" "How would we know that? We just got here." The response from the hat man made Sango nearly frown. Surely, his name was known even beyond the confines of the city. Any aspiring adventurer would know the name of one of the strongest adventurers in the city, as well as the top party in all of the city. Yet, none of that recognition seemed to be coming from the fellow before him. The girl beside him also said nothing. She just stood there like a statue, almost as if she wasn't witnessing anything that was happening. Do they both not recognize me? Are they messing with me, or? Sango's thoughts trailed. The cackles of his subordinates brought him back to reality, though, as they started making fun of him. Seems like your popularity has plummeted, Sango. Being rank 7 is apparently not enough for the newcomers to recognize you. You're not gonna let it slide, are you? At this point, Sango couldn't help his frown. He raised his voice at the drunks that he called subordinates. Would you stop already? You guys are already drunk. He was only met with more ridicule. We're drunk? Look who's talking. Maybe we're all sober and you're the one that's drunk. Ha 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 ha. At this point, Sango slapped his hand on his face and stood upright, removing his face so close to the gentleman who stood before him. These guys are bumming me out. He sighed. Despite having lots to drink, Sango wasn't drunk in the slightest. He had his barbarian genes to thank for that fact. Unfortunately, the embarrassments caused by his comrades was enough to wish that he wasn't sober. In any case, let's not waste any time and get to the point. Sango pointed at the two, who patiently waited for him to recover from his mortification. You two should withdraw from the heroic rank test. No way. What? I said. No way. Why no way? Because it's not possible. Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard? At this point, Sango was exasperated. He was nearly running out of breath due to the quick back and forth. He wasn't used to this kind of defiance from people, especially from people younger than him. Only those who had proven themselves as stronger could do that, and he wasn't getting that vibe from the two of them. Look here, you punks. Sango's tone took a deeper and more aggressive tone. You're just a bunch of newbies. Do you have any idea how insulting it is to opt for the most difficult rank from the start? The man with the hat cocked his head slightly and asked a very, but pertinent question. It's not against the rules, is it? Sango felt slighted by that response. He really wasn't used to people talking back to him like this, so he responded in the only way he knew how to. Listen here, it might not be against the rules, but it is still wrong to do. Sango simply raised his voice. That always did the trick for him. As his thunderous voice filled the area, the air itself vibrated, and everyone who watched the scene shivered. Well, everyone except the two who stood right in front of him. How is it wrong? It's lawful. He's still running his mouth? How? Sango's eyes widened. The man in front of him clearly wasn't normal. However, that didn't stop the barbarian from speaking even more. It's wrong to the adventurers that are here. You're seniors who have been working their butts off for so long. How do you think it looks like to them when a bunch of amateurs show up and want to skip the process? If you're strong enough, I see no reason why you can't just get a rank suited for your strength. The response of the gentleman was reasonable, but Sango did not accept it. After all, that line of reasoning only applied to those who were strong enough. And these two? Sango wasn't sure that they qualified. Look, you don't get it? When guys like you just pop up and throw your money around to get the exams. It pisses off honest adventurers who look up to that rank and work hard every day so that they can get to that level one day. Sango wasn't just pulling words out of his ass. Majority of the adventurers who watched this entire scene nodded in agreement to the barbarian's words. We have the way we do things here. I'm saying this for your sake too. So you should just go back there and change the kind of test you want to have. Silence engulfed the area, and the gentleman placed his hand on his chin as if deliberating on what to do. Sango grinned widely, happy that he was able to knock some sense into the haughty newcomers without resorting to violence. Unfortunately, his happiness was cut short by the hat man's response. No. It's not possible. Why is it not possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard? In response to this, the gentleman merely shrugged. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd best be on our way. The dark-coated man and his white-clad maiden walked past Sango in a calm and elegant stride. But... hold on. Sango held the shoulder of the man, his frown deepening to a monstrous degree. Sparks of lightning flashed in his eyes, and his muscles began to bulge to an unbelievable extent. Everyone who saw this took the hint and stepped back. It seems you weren't paying any attention to what I was saying. Sango until he became at least twice as tall as the man whose shoulder he held. His deadly gaze echoed violence, and his overwhelming power overflowed through all parts of his body. You will change the rank of your test. And if I refuse? The man responded, his calm voice an antithesis to the rough echoes of Sango's growl. Upon hearing this, the ebony giant grinned like a maniac and gave the only response he could render at this point. Then. Bzzzzz. Sango's hand crackled with electricity as it rushed towards the face of the stranger faster than the eye could process. This blur of a fist was capable of breaking the toughest boulders and tearing apart buildings. Against a single man, it was overkill. Whoosh. The blow neared the target, and all closed their eyes, expecting hear the squishing sound of flesh. What they heard, instead, was a slapping sound. Almost as if, somehow, the blow had been stopped by a palm. All opened their eyes, and to their unanimous shock, that was indeed the case. Sango's blow was stopped by the white partner of the dark gentleman. What are you? Whoosh. Before Sango could even say anything, an invisible gale of wind blew him away, sending him flying far away. Perhaps into oblivion. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. In case you haven't noticed, I have decided to upload a lot of chapters daily, for the next 10 days. That way, we can swiftly get to the good bits and have a lot of fun. Please cheer me on.